Hello, I'm author Nancy Flinchbaugh, and I invite you to listen to this podcast of Writing for Change. And today we're focusing on writing for the deaf and an interview that I did recently with Joyce Hurd, who's the author of Always Forward. Joyce Gardner Hurd is the author of fiction, essays, and short stories. She lives in New Hampshire with her Maine Coon cat, Kiki. A former advertising agency executive, she graduated from Southern New Hampshire University with a degree in creative writing and enjoys traveling, reading, gardening, and cooking, and seeing her friends. She grew up as a child of deaf parents, which gives her insight into the world of silence, physical disabilities, and the stereotypes that they faced, which inspired her to write her book, Always Forward. Please join me in welcoming Joyce Gardner Hurd. Well, welcome, and I'm so happy to be interviewing Joyce Hurd today, who writes for change, who writes for the deaf. And I want to ask you, Joyce, first of all, to tell me a little bit about yourself and what motivated you to become an author.
Well, I am 67 years old. I live in New Hampshire. I spent most of my life in Massachusetts, but about a year ago, I moved to New Hampshire just because it was closer to my brother. I worked in advertising in Boston for the bulk of my career, and I was motivated to write. I am the child of deaf adults. I'm a coda, and my parents were pretty remarkable to me. And deafness is very misunderstood, I think, by people who don't know anybody that's deaf. So my motivation was to write about my parents, mostly my dad, just to show that deaf people are there are ranges of deafness, there are ranges of people. I mean, it's such a diverse group that to kind of define people by just that name to be deaf is very limiting, and I don't think that's fair. I think that they are amazing people with their own culture, their own language, and I wanted to explore that.
Well, your first book, which you've written, is Always Forward, and I read it and I really enjoyed it. And I think you accomplished, what you're hoping to do, taking us into the life of a deaf man. And we get to experience firsthand, what he experiences with a lot of the hearing people and a loving family. But tell me a little bit about that book. You can talk about it more better than I can, I'm sure.
Well, it's fiction. It's
Yeah.
based on my father's life, but I certainly made up a good deal of it because I had to warn my brother ahead of time that one of the main women characters in the book was not my mother, our mother, because she's not my mother. Anyway, uh,
Catherine.
Catherine, yes, not my mother. Several people actually asked me that, and I'm like, no, not my mother. She was the fictionalized part, but in terms of the challenges that he faced on a day-to-day basis, being dismissed out of hand because he was deaf, not being able to enter the military, which still happens today. The deaf are not allowed to join the military.
Hmm.
Um, those things are true. I think that the other thing that I wanted to show is my family. The woman that is his mother in the book is my grandmother. And several people said to me when they critiqued the book, they thought that maybe she wasn't as well-rounded a character because she was so saintly. And I thought, well, she was. So that was my goal, just to show what a deaf man can do, even in the 40s and 50s, where there was certainly much, much less awareness and much more discrimination against the deaf.
Yeah. Well, such a loving family, his mother and father, gave him such a good foundation. And I guess that's what your father experienced. And
Definitely.
yeah, and you see how that makes a difference in somebody's life. So what are you hoping as you write for change? What do you hope this book will change for people who are deaf and people who work and live with people who are deaf?
Well, I think just to be open-minded, that as I said earlier, one size doesn't fit all. I mean, my dad had a younger friend who went to uh, one of the technical colleges and was an engineer. And my dad certainly never took a handout. He had a long career as a printer, which was a great occupation for deaf men in the 40s and 50s. A lot of them entered that profession because all that noise didn't really bother them. He had a house, he had a family, he had a career, he had friends. I think just to show hearing people, as I said earlier, that deafness isn't a one size fits all. Um, and at the risk of appropriating another's culture, I wanted deaf people to see that about themselves, that they are seen, heard, that they have a voice, and that they can be represented in art.
I thought you did a really good job showing his intelligence. He was a very intelligent man, your character, and was very capable of learning complicated mathematical theories. And I thought that, as opposed to the way he was sometimes treated as not being smart or, being stupid or being called dummy. I thought you did a good job with that. And
Thank
I
you.
think it will open people's eyes who read that and make them think, when they see somebody signing in public, to realize that that person is an intelligent person.
Absolutely. I think the other thing that sometimes happens with people with disabilities is that they kind of get put on a pedestal, like they have no faults. Um, there's a term for it that I read not too long ago. It's kind of like the saintliness of disability. And that was the other thing I wanted to show, that just because you have a handicap does not mean that you're always perfect or always a good person, that you have your faults too. And that was something that I wanted to show, is just that they're three-dimensional people. They have legs,
Certainly
they have
saw
hands.
the faults in Catherine.
I kind of did. I didn't mean to, but yeah, I think I did.
But she also was not treated very well with her family, and that does cause, in all people.
And that's not uncommon for one of the things that I know my dad talked about when, he shared family stories, was that a lot of children who were deaf in that period, he was born in 1927, were institutionalized. In fact, there was another neighbor who had a sister who was deaf, excuse me, and she was institutionalized. And as they grew up and, they were boys together in the neighborhood, and as they got older as young men, one of the things that I think was very difficult for this friend to absorb was the contrast between his sister, who was institutionalized, and my father, who lived a very full life. I mean, they were friends until the day my dad died. So it was kind of sad to see that contrast. But
Mhm,
at that time, that's what people did.
mhm. Well, I think it's a great book, and I recommend that everybody read it. And it's a riveting story and just gently written. And I really enjoyed it, but it's also a teaching book. So, do you have any other books planned? I think you said you're writing another one now.
I am. I'm in the third or fourth draft of a book. I jumped ahead about 2 decades. It's in the 70s. A little easier for me to write about since that was my time. It's about a young woman growing up in New England who faces her own challenges. She's not deaf, but she has other things to deal with. It's a little more personal, but it kind of takes place in America and Nova Scotia. So I'm having fun writing that because that's where a lot of my family are from.
Okay. Well, we'll look for do you have a title for that yet?
No, I don't. I think that's the hardest thing to do, is come up with a title. That's
Yeah.
awful.
Well, how can people contact you and buy your book?
Well, I have a website, jgardnerhurd.com, and the book is available on Amazon. It's also available on barnesandnoble.com. And I think if you went into it, because a lot of people like to order through independent bookstores, I think they will get it for you if you go in and ask for it.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for talking with me today. It was nice to meet you, Joyce, and I
Here,
thank
thank you
you
so
for
much for
your
having me.
writing for change and
I appreciate
advocating
that.
for the deaf community. It's
Thank
beautiful.
you so much.
You can find more information on Joyce Gardner Hurd on her website at jgardnerhurd.com. You can also follow her on Facebook at jgardnerhurd. Always Forward is available on both Amazon and Barnes & Noble. I hope you'll check it out. Thank you for listening to this Writing for Change podcast. I encourage you to follow it. If you would like more information on me, Nancy Flinchbaugh, and my books, check out my website at nancyflinchbaugh.com.